Welcome back everyone to Story Time with Claddagh National School and me, Mr. Leonard. Well, I'm very excited to continue our story today. You might remember we were reading Fionn MacCumhail and the Feathers from China from the famous Shanachi's Eddie Lenihan's book, Irish Tales of Mystery and Magic. One of my favourite books, as I said the other day. So, I don't know if you can remember where we were, but I'll do a little summary for you anyway. I think we had got through the stranger coming to visit the court of King Cormac, the High King of all Ireland, and he settled down and told them he had a story they'd never heard before, and he started telling them a story about travelling in a land called China. You might remember he travelled in an animal called a camel, which was a very strange thing to the Irishmen in the audience at the time. They'd never heard of one. And then he went up on a big huge wall beyond in China. I don't know if you ever heard of anything like that yourselves. And eventually then he ended up going out across the sea for 3 days over boats and down into a city below in a bubble underneath the sea. And that was where it got interesting, because there he had learnt about a new way that the people over there tortured the people who broke the law. And we just got to that yesterday, hadn't we? He'd gone into the jail and all he could hear from the cells was screeching and giggling and people laughing. He thought there was a big party going on. Do you remember? So eventually he went into one of the cells just to see what was going on. He saw a man strapped down onto a bed there and he thought, whoa, I wonder are they using hot irons or pitchforks or something to torture him, or what sort of awful stuff are they at? So that was where we left off. So I'll continue now. There was two big jailers in the cell, and the stranger continued his story. He said, one of the big men went around the other side of the table to give me a better view. Fierce, mannerly people, the Chinese, as I said. And when I saw him flexing his huge arms, I thought he was surely going to grab the poor man at the table by the toes or by the neck or something and start twisting. Not a bit of it. He started humming to himself, and you could see the sweat rolling off the poor man on the table, and the jailer there humming away as he turned round to face the wall. It was only then that I saw on the wall, on a little shelf, a row of feathers, from the biggest swan feather on the left-hand side right down to the smallest little wren's feather on the right. Man, when I saw him reaching along this shelf, I thought he was gone off his head. Would you believe me? He walked up and down the shelf, and every few steps he'd stop and he'd look at the man on the table and he'd scratch his chin and he'd hum to himself, shake his head, look at the feathers and then walk on again, like he wouldn't be able to make up his mind or something. There was a kind of a sorrowful look in his face, you know. Oh, no. Oh, well, I was just going to ask the second man what was wrong with this fella, when at last he put his hand up into the middle of the feathers, gave one last look at the man tied onto the table, and took down one of them. Very delicately, he did it too for such a big man. You'd never think such big, thick fingers could handle so small a thing like a feather so neatly. But he knew his trade. Well, I'll admit to every man here, he said, and he looked around at the listeners, including King Cormac, that I thought I'd laugh at the sight of a monster of a man like that threatening another man, with a feather. But the fellow on the table wasn't laughing though. Far from it. His voice was gone and there was a pool of sweat under the table after it rolling off him. I'll show you the picture in a minute. Well, the big man began down at the bottom of the table at the soles of the poor man's feet, and he started tickling him. Now would you like to see the picture? There we go. Can you see the man's feet down the bottom and I'm tied down to the table and the big huge jailer coming with a feather? Oh man, it's a strange sort of torture this, isn't it? Anyway, he started tickling away and well, you'd hear him screeching from a mile away, and by the time the jailer got up to his oxters, they're your Armpits, by the way, you know that though, don't you? You know what your oxters are. By the time he got up to his oxters, the breath was gone from the poor man, and I'm gasping for mercy. He was nearly quenched from all the laughing. The other jailer, who was standing by my side looking on at all this, said, "That will do for now. Maybe our friend from the Western world has seen enough." I nodded, of course. I was so surprised, and they released the poor man. Off he went, shaking, half laughing, half crying to himself. Oh, he was nearly broken, the poor fella. Well, when I got control of my speech again, I asked, "Is that the way ye deal with criminals and hoodoos in this place?" "That's it," they said. "And by the time a man is done once from head to toe, he won't want to know anything about a second treatment. He's a model citizen, the best behaved man in all the world, for evermore." What other way could it be? Can you imagine if we started with the smallest feather and went up to the biggest, to the swan's tail feather? The man would be a raving lunatic for life by the time we finished. Well, hearing this, the men of Fianna were flabbergasted. They wanted to hear no more after that about the people, the houses, or the streets, only over and over again about the feathers and how they were handled. "Bless us and save us," they babbled, "and tell us, if we took you out now to the duck house or the hen house, could you pick out the feathers that you used?" "Some of them anyway," said the man, "but you won't get all the feathers you need off the one type of bird." "Tomorrow is another day, and there's many a different kind of bird in this area. But come on, we'll settle for the ducks tonight." And there and then, Fionn took him out to the duck house, a most unusual thing to do to a guest at a feast. But it was an important occasion, and in any case, things could be done at the Hall of Tara that might not be acceptable in other places. Torches were provided, and the poor ducks got a quick plucking, not to mention the hens as well. A short time later, Fionn entered the hall again, holding a mighty gobble of feathers, followed by the stranger and a group of the pluckers. Fionn landed all the feathers on King Cormac's table, and the stranger began to pick, choose, and sort, while Cormac sat stock still, more interested than if gold was being counted out in front of him, his two eyes riveted on the man's flying fingers as he picked the feathers and sorted them and put them in order. This one here, and this one here, and on down the line until he came to the smallest feather, which the eye could hardly see. The nose tickler, he called that one. Oh, that one will drive a man out through the top of his own head with laughing, after maybe cudgels have been bouncing off him for 3 days with no result, he said. Can you imagine being tied down to a table and having the nose tickler treatment? It wouldn't be too nice, would it? Then, when the man had the sorting done, all the feathers nicely in a row, he said, "There now, they're the ones we want. Gather round, everyone who wants to see, but breathe easy. One puff or a cough, or, heaven forbid, a sneeze, and all of my work is for nothing. 'Tis all ruined." The men thronged around, almost standing on top of each other's backs, each man oogling the feathers as if they were magic creatures. Then, at a gesture from Cormac, they took their seats again, and the stranger spoke. "I paid very careful attention in China to the different feathers for different jobs. There's one for the sole of the foot, one for behind the knee, one for the elbow, one for the palm of the hand, and one for just behind your lug here. In fact, there's no place on the human body that a feather cannot be found for." "Oh, Hannah Yowl," said Fionn. "I can't wait to try them out for myself." "Hold on there now," he said, and he picked out a feather. "What's this one for?" "That one," said the stranger, "is for the top of the head." "Conan Whale, stand up," said Fionn. Do you remember Conan Whale? He was the bald fella in the Fianna, just like somebody you might know. Anyway, Conan rose, made his way up to the high table, his beautiful bald head shining in the light of the torches. "Sit down there now, Conan," said Fionn, "till I try this on you." Conan sat down and Fionn started. No effect, not even a little giggle out of Conan. He just sat there, saying nothing. "Am I doing it right?" said Fionn to the stranger, a disappointed look on his face. "You are not," says he. "Watch me," said the stranger. And then, for everyone to see, he gave a demonstration with the feather that left the men of Fianna breathless with admiration and poor Conan breathless from laughing. He was almost fit to collapse. Stop! Get it away from my beautiful big bald head! Stop it! He was dying with the laughter. Do you want to see a picture? There's a really good one here. There you go. There's the stranger. I hope you can see that now. And there is poor Conan Whale, and I'm getting the tickler treatment right on the top of his noggin, and I'm dying with the laughter there in his chair, the poor fella. Anyways, so, "Oh, be gob," said Fionn. "It works! It works! We must all get our own set of these. We must!" There was a mad heaving of men to their feet, scraping of stools, and a surge of excited voices. Every man in Fianna was set to rush out, pluck whatever birds he could get his hands on, and make up a set of these wonderful weapons to try out on his worst enemies. They thought it'd be a much finer way to treat an enemy than a sword. Someone shouted, "We'll start a war! It's the only way we'll get a good tryout out of them." "None of that!" roared King Cormac in a dangerous voice, and all was silent again fairly quick. But being no fool, he knew when to humour his men. So he said, "I'm looking for someone to do a small job for me for a little while now, and it might involve a bit of persuasion," says he. And the words were hardly out of his mouth when a shower of hands shot up. All volunteers. "King, your highness, pick me! The men in Fianna were a little bit like children sometimes. "Good men," said King Cormac. "I knew I could rely on Fianna," he smiled. "Here now is what I want. There's a crowd of blackguards out there in Connemara, and they owe me a lot of money in overdue taxes. You could start with that crowd. If you can make them pay me what I'm owed, I'll make these feathers part of the standard equipment of Fianna from now on." "We'll do it," shouted Fionn. "If there's any man that wants to stay at home, let him say it now." And he looked around the hall. Not a sound. "Oh, I'm glad to hear that silence," he laughed. Fionn got the sorted set of feathers from the stranger, and the following day, when the other men had their sets sorted too, they started off west, sheer on Boher to Connemara. They left their swords, spears, and all other equipment behind them at Tara, and when the people saw them marching down the roads of Ireland with no weapons, they said, "Oh, look! The Fianna must be going on their holidays." But when they looked closer, and they saw each man wearing a row of feathers around his belt, short on one side, long on the other, like a lopsided dress, they said, "Here, the lads are gone like natives. There's something wrong with them." After a steady day's marching, they arrived at the Dún of O'Flaherty, chief of the blackguards beyond in Connemara. O'Flaherty Gurram, as he was called, because he used to wear blue war paint on his face to terrify his enemies. They're a wild bunch out in Connemara. Fionn stepped up to the gate of the Dún, out near Indravaughan, beyond Spidale, and called out, "Open the gate! We have a small bit of talking to do. A message from King Cormac, High King of Ireland, including Connemara," says he. The gate was opened, and when O'Flaherty saw that they had no weapons, he said in his most friendly voice, Tarastaff, come in, and tell me, what brings ye to this part of Ireland? My, isn't it lovely decorations you're wearing, ladies? Oh, lads, I mean." He was highly amused when he saw the feathers. Fionn knew only too well when he was being mocked or when somebody was making fun of him, so he said in a very careful and deliberate voice, "Rinne Ussel O'Flaherty. The message from King Cormac is that you owe him money, and if you're not inclined to pay it, We have orders to make a withdrawal from your treasury, with or without the key. The treasury was where they kept their gold. Ho 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 ho! Cackled O'Flaherty. My treasury, is it, ladies? There was a rustle of movement among the men behind Fionn, but he held his hand up to calm his men down. He didn't want a fight breaking out just yet. O'Flaherty spoke on, poison coming into his voice now. You have no weapons, Fionn MacCumhail, and there isn't a man walking that I respect without a sword in his hand. I'll pay no man until he makes me do it. Tell that to your King Cormac, and beyond in Tara, the far side of the Shannon. I'd think a small bit more about it if I was you, said Fionn in his Sunday voice. We're peaceful men, but if we're rubbed up the wrong way, well, if your druid isn't able to tell you stories about what we do to men who disobey the king, you should give him his walking papers and get a man that's more up to the job of giving you the news you need to hear. He'll last longer as chief that way. So look, why wouldn't you deliver King Cormac's taxes safe into our hands now, like a good man, and there'll be no more noise? O'Flaherty wouldn't hear of it. He said he'd ram them all into the deepest dungeon and pour boiling porridge on top of them if they didn't clear off back to Tara, and be quick about it. Marvellous, said Fionn, but you'll meet us again. And soon. You'll be welcome as far as the gate anyway, said O'Flaherty. And bring your granny with you the next time. She might be a bit more scary, says he. Ho 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 ho! And I'm laughing away. They left, and O'Flaherty's men conveyed them for 5 miles of the road, insulting them every step of the way. In the Dún of Indraon that night, there was a great celebration. O'Flaherty Gurram and his men thought they had defeated na Fianna and humiliated them and made absolute fools of them without even striking a blow. All Cormac's gold safe in Connemara. Sure, why wouldn't they celebrate? Even the guards at the gate joined in the merrymaking. But when they were at their jolliest in the feasting hall of Indraon that night, in the darkness, na Fianna returned and went about their business, in their usual silent, deadly way. They padded through the darkness around the unguarded Dún and quickly found the window of O'Flaherty's sleeping chamber, or his bedroom. I'm going to leave it there for today, guys. What do you think they're going to do next? And could you think of any words to describe O'Flaherty Gurram and beyond in Connemara mocking Fionn MacCumhail at his gate? What sort of a fella do you think he was? Well, we might find out more tomorrow what he's really like when we see what Fionn and the Fianna do from the window of O'Flaherty Gurram's bedroom at the Dún out in Indraon beyond Shirabor in Connemara. Thanks a million for listening, and I won't see you tomorrow actually because it's Friday. I'd forgotten what day it was. We'll be back on Monday, so you have the whole weekend now to think about what Fionn and the Fianna are going to do next to O'Flaherty Gurram. Alright, I hope you have a lovely weekend, and I hope you're minding yourselves and being good for your mammies and daddies and having lots of fun and learning loads and playing loads and getting out as much as you can. Mind yourselves everyone, take care.